Hello, everyone, and welcome to ProLine. We've got a college football preview show. I'm John Cranton in Las Vegas, joined by Jeff Saad, who runs Las Vegas Sports Services. Today, we're going to take a look at two conferences, a couple of independents, Notre Dame and BYU. We're also going to take a look at the former Big East Conference. It's now called the American Athletic Conference. The A.A.C. will probably be better known as. And all kinds of changes for the Big East. They're now a 10-team league. Pittsburgh and Syracuse are out. So for this season, they're adding Central Florida, Houston, and Memphis. And in 2014, they're going to be adding East Carolina, Tulane, and Tulsa. And then in 2015, Navy is going to be aboard. So this is kind of a super conference. Last year, the Big East had 5 teams, Jeff, that were 5-2. You had Louisville, Rutgers, Syracuse, and Cincinnati all tied for first. So which one of these teams do you think has got a good shot to either be the top team or be the powerhouse team in this division?
Yeah, the American Athletic Conference. It sounds like an amateur league from the 1950s. You think they could come up with something more original than that, but that's what it's going to be starting July 1st. I think Louisville has the best chance to win this conference. One thing, they have a great schedule. Not only the conference, they could have national championship implications with this schedule. They return 5 on offense, 9 on defense. The defense has much more depth than last year. Marcus Smith, at defensive end, will be back. He had a great game versus Florida in the Sugar Bowl when the Cardinals won 33-23 as a 14-point dog. Preston Brown's back at linebacker. He led the team in tackles last year. Secondary is going to be strong again. Last year they were 60th in the country. And of course on offense, everything, all the talk was about Teddy Bridgewater. 27 TDs last year, only 8 interceptions. He has his wide receivers are all coming back. They had the 24th ranked passing offense last year, 31 points per game, 269 yards passing per contest. Also, the schedule, as I said, is going to be, who's the play? Ohio, Eastern Kentucky, Florida International, Temple, and Memphis. Their toughest games would be probably at Temple and UConn and Cincy, and they get UCF and South Florida at home. Some people are talking about 12-0 this year. That might be a tall order, but with this schedule and with the returning starters, especially on defense and with Bridgewater, I'd say Louisville has a shot at an 11-1 season, John.
Yeah, they definitely look like a powerhouse team. Charlie Strong, he's just done an outstanding job there. He came over from Florida where he was the defensive coordinator, and that was certainly a revenge game against his old team in that bowl game. Very impressive. I'm going to take a look at Rutgers, another great defensive team. This is the last season for Rutgers in this conference. They're actually going to be joining the Big Ten in 2014, but they're off an impressive year, 9 wins, 4 losses, and they did that without having an offense that was any good. Kyle Flood's team, they were 9-4 last year, and the offense, well, they do have their junior quarterback back in Gary Nova, 22 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, 2,600 yards passing, just over that, and 57% completion. So he was okay, but not great. But he is back, which is key. And he's got his top target, a 6'6" senior wide receiver, Brandon Coleman. He led the team with 718 yards and an impressive 16.7 yards per catch. Now, when you look at the offense last year, they really weren't that impressive. 21.5 points per game, 208.5 yards passing. That ranked 88th in the nation, and just 121 yards rushing. So with these guys coming back, they should be better. They really can't be any worse, but they certainly have the talent and the experience to be better. The ground game lost their top guy in Jawan Jamison. He had just over 1,000 yards. They do have the junior running back, Savon Huggins, back. Not a big guy, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Had 610 yards rushing last year. However, only 3.4 yards per carry. And when you take a closer look at what he did, he had one monster game. That was against Cincinnati, 179 yards rushing, 4.4 yards per carry. That was a big 10-3 win. But in the bowl game against Virginia Tech, just 2.7 yards per carry against that great Virginia Tech defense. So the passing game is probably going to have to carry the team. Then there's the defense. Boy, this is what they leaned on last year. 14.2 points per game. That was 4th in the nation. If you want to look at it, they really didn't play a lot of good offenses. However, the 3 they did play, they're still very impressive. They went to Arkansas and won 35-26. They played that very good Syracuse passing offense, won the game 23-15, and then that big showdown with Cincinnati. That was on the road, and they won 10-3. the defense returns linebacker Steve Longa, and he's going to have to step in and replace Cassine Green and Steve Buaranis, both in the middle of the line. The only thing to keep in mind is that they didn't finish strong last year, 0-3 straight up in ATS to end last season, and it was really ugly. They lost 27-6 to Pittsburgh, 20-17 to Louisville, and they were favored at home in that one. And then, of course, the bowl game against Virginia Tech, they lost 13-10. So they're on a 3-0 run under the total with that suspect offense and great defense, part of a 9-3 run under the total for last season if you like to play totals. All right, Jeff, another team is Cincinnati, another team that won 10 games last year. Can they do it again?
Yeah, the entire offensive line returns. They returned 7 altogether in offense, 6 on defense. They were 10-3 last season. They've won 10 games in 5 of the last 6 years. They were 9-4 against the spread last season. New coach Tommy Tuberville, he should be more comfortable here because he'll play a more balanced offense. At Texas Tech, because of the personnel and maybe even the fans, he was probably forced to play a mostly passing offense there, which he's not really comfortable with. But he hired Eddie Grand as assistant coach. He was the running backs coach with Tuberville at Auburn, which means they'll probably have a more balanced offense this season. Last year, the offense averaged 32 points, 239 yards passing, 201 yards rushing per game. So that should be about the same this year. The quarterback Brendan Kay was granted a 6-year of eligibility because he's had so many injuries. But last year he was 70 of 113 for 966 yards and 6 TDs, only 2 interceptions. The backup Munchie Legault is capable. Kay knocked him out of his position last year, but Legault is a capable backup quarterback. He has to replace George Wendt at running back, and looks like it's going to be 5'7" junior running back Ralph David Abernathy IV, 366 yards rushing last year. He was the second leading rusher per carry, 5.3 yards per carry. The defense is going to be the question mark. They lost 3 defensive ends. Last year they were 14th in the nation in defense, so they were pretty good last year. We'll see how they do this year. Greg Blair is back at middle linebacker. Since he's on a 7-4 run over the total, and at the end of the season with a big revenge game against Louisville, they lost 34-31 last year. The schedule, they start out with, they have home games with Purdue and Northwestern State. They go on the road at Illinois, Miami, Ohio. With this team, it's hard to say with the new coach and everything, but I think Cincinnati can have a 9-3 season, John.
Okay, well, I'm going to take a look at the Houston Cougars. We've called them quarterback university the last few years with a great offense, and they had exactly that last year, 32.4 points per game, 328.4 yards passing. That was the 11th ranked passing attack in the nation, and even the running game was good with 151 yards rushing. And the offense looks explosive this year. You get junior quarterback Dave Palan back, 16 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. They got a guy in the backfield, senior running back Charles Sims. He had 853 yards, 6 yards per carry, a tremendous playmaker, runner, and receiver when he's healthy. And they got some good young wideouts who they like. Deontay Greenberry had 569 yards receiving last year. Larry McDuffie is back along with Daniel Spencer. Spencer was the number 2 leading receiver with 579 yards. So when you look at the Houston offense, boy, this team is going to be potent. And yet, despite all that points, this team was 5-7 last year, 5-7 straight up, and 5-7 against the spread. Now, why was that? Well, the defense was horrendous. They gave up 36 points per game. In Conference USA, they gave up 483 yards per game. That was dead last. So that's the problem. Can they fix it? Well, they do have 10 starters. They have 10 starters back on offense, but the defense has some new looks. They were just so bad. They were 107th nationally in third down defense, a small defensive front. And making matters worse for the Cougars is they lose 2 of their best defensive players, linebacker Phil Stewart and cornerback DJ Hayden. And this is a team that went out and scored 42 points against SMU and lost the game by 30 points. How do you do that? And lost 72-42. So you got 4 starters back up front, and the secondary was just horrendous, 290 yards passing per game. They do have quite a bit of the secondary back, but when you give up almost 300 yards, you're better off having some newcomers in there. So on paper, this Houston team looks identical. They're going to be unstoppable on offense, but they're going to have a lot of problems stopping people. How does that relate to wagering? They carry a 5-3 run over the total into the new season. As long as this offense stays healthy, Jeff, I wouldn't be surprised to see that trend continue. How about a more experienced team like Central Florida? They're another one that won 10 games last season. Can they repeat that?
Yeah, the games they lost, they could have won. They had two close losses at toss-up, including one in overtime. They lost to Ohio State 31-16, which was closer than the score indicated, and they lost to Missouri 21-16 due to turnovers. They outgained Missouri. They lost due to a couple of big interceptions. They returned 6 on defense, 6 on offense, 6 on defense. They were 7-7 against the spread last season. Blake Bortles is back at quarterback. He threw for 25 TDs, 7 interceptions, over 3,000 yards, 63% completion rate last year. And they've returned 4 of the top 5 receivers, including Brashad Perriman, who had 388 yards, and Rennell Hall, a team leading 631 yards. Their offense averaged 35 points last year, 181 yards rushing, 225 yards passing. The defense was 27th in the nation. This year, though, they lose five veteran defensive starters, including defensive end Troy Davis. Linebacker is a big question mark. So this team's offense should have no problems this year. The defense would be the big question mark. Their schedule, they're 10-4 over the total. And that may continue with the great defense, or the great offense and the questionable defense. The schedule here, they play Akron and Florida International. They have to play at Penn State, and they're home against South Carolina. They have Louisville on the road. With this defense, I know that George Lurie always does a great job, but I'm predicting I'll go with UCF for a 7-5 season, John. I was going to go 8-4, but I'll go 7-5 in this season for UCF, John.
Okay, I'm going to go to South Florida Bulls. They're off a train wreck season under Skip Holtz, who had trouble the last couple of years bringing in talented skill guys, and so they have an overhaul. They're bringing in Willie Taggart from Western Kentucky. He's only 37. He'll be 37 years old when the season starts. A young guy who is a hot coaching commodity, and he did wonders at Western Kentucky when he took over back in 2010. It was just a program in shambles. He went 2-10 that first year, but turned it around. The next year, in 2011, they had an 0-4 start, and all of a sudden they won 7 of their last 8 games, and the only loss was to then number 1 ranked LSU. And then 2012, last year, they had a winning record, 7-6. They averaged 28 points and 178 yard rushing, and they had a game at Kentucky of the SEC last year, and they pulled up the upset win as a +6 dog, 32-31. Now, Taggart was a running backs coach with Stanford back in 2006 under Jim Harbaugh, and Harbaugh, as we know, is a proponent of attacking up front, physical, pounding, running games, and really that's kind of what Taggart is like. His Western Kentucky team's very good at running the football, and he inherits a South Florida team that was actually pretty good last year, 151 yards rushing per game. He is rebuilding, though. This program has problems all over the board. You can start at quarterback, where a 4-year starter in B.J. Daniels is gone. He was shaky at times, but they have to start from scratch. So there are 2 guys who are competing for the job, and sophomore quarterback Matt Floyd and senior quarterback Bobby Avell. However, these guys have combined for 3 touchdowns and 12 picks, so I wouldn't be surprised if Taggart just goes with his own guys and his own system because he's starting from scratch. And then you got the defense, which really struggled last year, 27.4 points. But more important, it's turnovers. I mean, South Florida last year had 9 takeaways. That was tied with New Mexico for fewest in the country. So a lot of rebuilding to do. One guy to keep an eye on is Chuck Bresnahan. He's the new defensive coordinator, and he was been a defensive coordinator for quite a while. He has some NFL experience with the Raiders, and essentially what they're bringing in is, instead of finesse, they're bringing in the physical game on both sides of the ball, very similar to what we saw Jim Harbaugh do with Stanford and the San Francisco 49ers. So he appears to be the right guy for the job, but he's got a lot of work to do. And if you're looking for where he's going to start, the incoming class is very heavy on defensive linemen, and he got a very good linebacker, a JUCO transfer in Rashman Swain. So you're looking at a team that is probably going to run the football, and their defense is probably going to be improved. And all of that means I can see South Florida being a team to look at under the total each game, because the ground game is going to eat up the clock, and the defense is probably going to be improved. So you might see a lot of low-scoring games early on with South Florida. Okay, now let's take a look at some independents, Notre Dame and BYU. Jeff, Notre Dame off that phenomenal season, undefeated until, of course, they had to run into a team from the SEC. How do things fare for the 2013 Irish?
Well, they've had a lot of strange and bad things happen to us at the beginning of the year. The Chicago Tribune listed all the things that have happened since the beginning of the year. First of all, of course, they got blown out by Alabama. Then Brian Kelly was rumored to go to the Eagles. Then the Manti Te'o fiasco with a fake girlfriend. Then they had a receiver, Devontae Neal, transferred. Quarterback Gunnar Kiel left. The defensive line recruit, one of the best recruits, Eddie Vanderdoe, was thinking about getting out of his letter of intent. And then now the latest thing, the Everett Gosen thing, he's leaving. So a lot of turmoil in Notre Dame and the Notre Dame program the last several months. They still have a good team though. They have they returned 4 on offense, 8 on defense last year, 12-1, 7-6 against the spread. Brian Kelly has upgraded the Irish defense, and the offense, of course, continues to make strides. They won a lot of close games last year, which is always a worry because you figure, just as like in baseball, when a team wins a lot of one-run games one season, the next year it tends to even out. That's one thing to keep in mind with Notre Dame this season. They have 3 QB quarterbacks now in contention, seniors Tommy Rees and Andrew Hendricks, as well as freshman quarterback Malik Zaire, and they're all going to be given a chance to take over a Gosen spot. They have running back George Atkinson, the third back, and of course senior wide receiver T.J. Jones is back. Defense last year allowed only 12.8 points per game. I don't know if they can repeat that again, but they still return 8 starters. The schedule, as usual, is challenging. They're playing Oklahoma at home. It's a big revenge game for Oklahoma, and they have Michigan at Stanford. So, despite all the things that happen in Notre Dame, I'll still predict that. Let's go 8-4 for Notre Dame this year, John.
Okay, I'll take a look at another good independent team. That's BYU. They're off a season where they went 8-5, 7-6 against the spread. You got 8 starters back on offense, 4 on defense. Some of the offense are very potent and balanced. 28.7 points per game, 247 yards passing. That was 50th in the country, and great balance with 153 yards rushing. And it was even more impressive when you realize that BYU had to use 3 quarterbacks because of injuries and ineffectiveness. Now, those 3 quarterbacks combined for 25 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. So plenty of experience returning for this year. You're going to start with the dual threat sophomore quarterback Taysom Hill, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 425 yards, but most importantly, he was second on the team in rushing with 336 yards, 6.1 yards per carry. In the backfield, they also have sophomore running back Jamal Williams, 775 yards. You got a senior wide receiver in Cody Hoffman, a big kid at 6'4". He had 100 receptions for 1,248 yards, 11 touchdowns. All of that led the team. Then you got 4 starters back on the offensive line, and they added 4 JUCO transfers to add some beef and depth on the offensive line. So got to believe this offense is going to be very balanced and potent again. And the BYU defense, boy, they've been great the last 2 years. 20 points per game allowed 2 years ago, and they were 22nd in the nation. Last year, they gave up just 14 points per game. That was 3rd in the nation. Now, they do lose quite a bit up front. However, they do have their big gun, and that's defensive end Kyle Van Noy. He's an All-American candidate, an extraordinary pass rusher, 13 sacks last season, so he's an outstanding anchor for this team. And remember, the BYU defense ranked 2nd in the nation in rushing yards, just 86.9 yards rushing per game, and they held 5 opponents to 7 points or fewer. They do lose 7 starters overall, 5 of them up front, and the secondary has some new looks too. But when you look at the schedule, boy, it's kind of some difficult schedule here. They're going to open at Virginia, so that's a long road trip. And then week 2, they got to host Texas later in the season, November. They are at Wisconsin. That's another road trip. And then at Notre Dame. So not quite as easy a schedule as we've seen in past years. Okay, that's going to wrap up this show. If you want to get on an early bird special for the NFL preseason that's approaching in August, LVSS has a special package, Jeff.
Yeah, this is the time of year to get the cheapest prices. Right now, you got to get the entire 4 weeks of the preseason, all the 5-star players, edge winners, a total of only $19. All you have to do is call 1-866-575-8916. Get the entire preseason, all the 5-star players, edge winners, just $19. 1-866-575-8916.
All right, and if you want to get on Jim Feist's Early Bird NFL preseason special, if you like to play August football, you get 4 weeks of August football in the NFL for $29. That's going to include Jim's preseason game of the year. You can sign up early for $29. 1-866-841-1655, and make sure you check out jimfeist.tv for more NFL and college football previews. Good luck, everyone.